Good afternoon, everyone. I am DeQuendra Bertrand. I am Communications Director here at the Aurora Institute. Thank you all for joining us and sticking with us. It has been an incredible amount of learning that we've experienced today. And, I've just been reflecting here on all of the things that I've learned, and I've been really thinking hard about sort of the arc of change. That's one of the things that's really hitting me. I'm having a profound appreciation for the complexities and the nuances of this work of moving our systems from where they are to where they could be. I think you all know that our work here at the Aurora Institute is all about advancing breakthrough policies and practices to ensure high quality learning for all. But getting there, getting to all of the outcomes that we're working toward requires a strong research agenda. There's just not a linear pathway from research and evidence to decision making and implementation and ultimately to change. And so system leaders have to do a lot of work to understand and interpret the research, and then to translate it to very specific operating landscapes and very specific socio-political contexts, and then a whole host of other actors have roles to play. So next slide, please. Shall we jump in? So we think that one of the most effective ways to bridge that span between research and that change is strategic communications. So that's what this next segment is all about. And I am delighted that we are going to be joined by three leaders who are rooted in personalized learning research, as well as three communicators, hey guys, who are charged with disseminating the results of personalized learning research. So next slide, please. Before we get started, I want to take a few minutes for all of us to do just this quick collective brainstorm. I'd like you all to go into the chat box and answer this question. What is one of the most effective strategies your organization uses to communicate personalized learning research? So head on over and let's hear from you about how you are doing the work of communications. Implementation tools based on research findings. Great. While others are coming in, I will name preparing the right messenger. I will name ceaseless practice and fine-tuning of key messages that are tailored to specific audiences. I'm hearing Elliot. Convenings, resources, awesome. Teachers themselves are the best messengers. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Storytelling. Yes. Student voices. Wonderful. Excellent. Trusted intermediaries. Excellent. 1 to 2 pagers. Please keep them coming. This is good stuff. Very much appreciating this. Tangible examples. Yes, keep them coming. And we are going to dig in very deeply into a lot of these with our presentations. But while you keep them coming, let's move to our next slide. We are now going to hear from our first esteemed panel. Thank you all for joining us. We are joined now by Dr. Cederick Ellis of McComb Schools, the superintendent there, Ruth Hellams, principal at Del Lago Academy, Campus of Applied Science, and Jeff Heyck Williams, director of Two Rivers Learning Institute at Two Rivers Public Charter Schools. Next slide, please. We are now going to go into another series of quick rapid fire presentations by these panelists, and they are responding to this question. What research on personalized learning have you and your colleagues used, and what has made it most useful? So with that grounding question, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Ellis.
Yes. Can you advance, please? Wanted to just give you a quick background on what's the McComb School District. We're located in the southwest region of Mississippi. We have approximately 2,500 students. across 8 schools. We have an early childhood center, 3 elementary schools. We have 1 middle school, 1 junior high school, 1 high school, a business and technology center. We have 100% of our students eat free and reduced lunch. 92% of our students are African American, 6% white, and 2 fall in Hispanic, Latino, and those other races. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you a quick agenda of what we will try to discuss very briefly with you today. We will give you a background, information, and implementation, 6 pillars of our student-centered learning, which is our personalized learning model, our thinking regarding rethinking our focus, and our future in motion. Next slide, please. In 2014, the McComb School District embarked upon the development of a strategic plan, and we have 5 core areas of focus. Those focus areas, they serve to propel the McComb School District into becoming a premier world-class school system where student success is inevitable and each student is cultivated to become a fierce competitor in the global society. With such a strong mission and strategic plan, we knew that we needed a paradigm shift, and we believe that student-centered learning would put us on the right trajectory. Our shift to student-centered pedagogy represented an important step in the quest to develop creative, autonomous learners who could readily adapt to these changing conditions in our environment. And what we found is that we relied heavily on the research of Harris and Cullen for our student-centered focus, because we thought that by adopting this student-centered focus, that the student-centered techniques would foster creativity, provide innovative thinking, and they will provide our scholars with those skills and abilities, not only for today's workforce, but the workforce to come. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you a visual of our 6 pillars of student-centered teaching and learning. These are our 6 pillars. And next slide. This next slide talk about those pillars in great detail. As you will see, that our mantra for student-centered teaching and learning, our mantra for these pillars, time is a variable, learning is a constant, and scholars are the focus. These 6 pillars are the foundation for our student-centered, our personalized learning approach in the McComb School District. And based upon the research from various sources, including publications for maximizing competency-based education, insights from experts in 2015, ideas brought forth by the Aurora Institute in its previous iterations of INACOL and Competency Works. That is how we came up with these pillars, a combination of all of those sources. Also, our districts, we visited other school districts in Detroit. We visit Kansas City, we visit Pueblo, New Mexico, where student-centered teaching and learning, personalized learning was being implemented. And we also relied heavily on those individuals. We also have networked with other districts through events sponsored by Education Reimagined, the Highland Institute, and EdSurge. I served on the American Association for School Administrators Personalized Learning cohort, and during that cohort, we got to visit several school districts across the nation that were implementing personalized learning. We also had an opportunity to visit some of those XQ super schools. Now, during the fall of 2016, we found that we had student-centered teaching and learning in place, but one of the things that we found is that we had some individual growth for our scholars, but that growth did not align to our accountability model, and we realized that with the research on student autonomy and moving students at their own pace, we could not divorce ourselves from an accountability system or those standards, and that led us to rethinking our focus. Next slide, please. Now, this slide talks about rethinking our focus. The components of SEL are the backbone of what we do in the McComb School District. And what I would say is that when you look at this slide, you will see our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and threats. But to come up with all of this, we utilize research by education elements. There is a needs assessment to identify district-wide and school-specific areas of strength and need for launching, strats, and scaling and supporting personalized learning. That was a framework that we used to rethink to rethink our focus and come up with the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. We also utilize the New School Rules by Anthony Kim and Alexis Gonzalez Black to improve meeting efficiency through practicing protocols and strategies. We looked at the work at several school districts similar to ours. We looked at the work of the Pasadena Independent School District in Houston, Texas. We looked at High Tech High in Denver, Colorado. When we looked at our strategic intent, and also when we looked at our strategic intent, we wanted to come up with those if-then statements to see that if we did this, how would that impact our personalized learning, our student-centered teaching and learning. When we look at the mindset piece, we had to shift the focus of the mindset piece and the research that we use to help us shift the mindset of our stakeholders. We utilize the personalized learning playbook by Anthony Kim. Next slide, please. And this slide is just lets you know our future in motion on based upon all of those pieces, what we'll be doing going forward. You will see our alignment and coherence. We want to be transparent. There has to be capacity building and student achievement. In student achievement, my people in the McComb School District wanted me to make sure that this body knew that the pilot school, Summit Elementary, that we launched in 2015, that school is the only school in our school district to receive a B rating on an accountability system. And we think that the reason that that school is the only school to receive a B on our accountability rating is because of the pieces that we're putting in place regarding personalized learning and student-centered teaching and learning. And so next slide. And next slide, I think that concludes my 5 minutes. And so we will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Really appreciate that. That was great. Let's turn things over now to Ruth.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for having me here. This is just an incredible experience just to be able to share a little bit. I put this picture at the beginning because I used to think this was beautiful. I used to love looking at this photo, and now it's simply a reminder of a campus that currently is not housing any, well, other than today, we have a few back, but it has been a long time since we saw a lot of students. And so what used to be a picture that inspired me is now a picture that draws some sadness from me. But this is a picture of our campus at Del Lago. Next slide. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Del Lago, our mission, and I won't read from the slide here, but what I would say is please note the third bullet. This is the focus, if you will, that has been the primary focus of our school in terms of communicating our work. It's kind of the nexus of everything that we do. Next slide. I also put my information in here if anyone would like to contact me to talk a little bit more about some of the information that I'm sharing today. Next slide. So I wanted to first start out by saying this is my 4th year at Del Lago. The school is 8 years young. And this commitment, this triangle, is a graphic representation of our school, similar to what Cederick just shared. Our school was founded both on the pillars. We have some pillars, they're behind me on a poster right now. This is where I stand when I'm tired of sitting in front of Zoom all day. But positioned at the center of everything that we do is culture. And then on either side are instruction and structures, and I'll talk a bit about the body of research that got us there. I would say to you all that since March 13th, culture and the relationship piece has been at the center of every conversation and every piece of communication that we've had. Next slide. So some of the philosophies that we had that are grounded in research are why we call our students scholars. We talk a lot about the fact that choice words and words matter. It's one of our pillars. And so we refer to our students as scholars. We also ascribe to the body of research around the fact that it takes a village to raise a child. And we are a village and cohort model. That has been incredibly challenging in the COVID pandemic time to maintain that in a virtual learning. We also ascribe to restorative practices, and we are everyone wall to wall at Del Lago is trained in the International Institute on Restorative Practices. That is a big part of our core belief system. We also, we're an Apple school. We believe that the role of technology at Del Lago is to assist a student. One of the things that I am grateful for, it's been an unintended, we've been talking a lot about the unintended benefits of COVID-19. One of the unintended benefits has been that we are really learning a lot more about the role of technology and what it can play as an assistive mode for communication with our scholars. And because we were one-to-one iPad since the beginning of the school's inception about 8 years ago, it was not as challenging a transition as what we had when we went to virtual learning, because we had that in place. And then we have a huge focus on college and career readiness. Next slide. So I'm not going to read these either, but I felt that they were important given the research that I'm going to talk about. It has been a journey to continue to work on personalized learning and authentic learning experiences in the distance learning environment, but it is one of the ways that we've been able to enhance the communication with our teachers and with our students about how do you maintain this in a different environment. Next slide. We also have an ethic of excellence. So we have a culture that fosters the student accomplishments and skilled professional teachers. And I loved the question that was posed at the beginning. How do we communicate the research with our teachers? We are still holding weekly Zoom meetings with our teachers, and we're still talking about the research and the commitments that we have to the research. So next slide. These are some of the elements of the instruction that we have, but I'm going to very quickly transition to the slide that talks about the research. I just wanted to speak for a moment about everything that we do here. We're an interdisciplinary system, so the teachers are cohorted together. And I'll talk about the research in that in a moment, but I just wanted to give a snapshot of who we are. We are attempt to have every junior do a 6-week internship where they don't come to school 2 days a week. So that is going to be a really interesting lift in the spring when we think about how we could do that virtually. And a lot of the other pieces that we do. We are a competency-based system. We ascribe to the principles of competency-based. We, just as was said, where learning is the constant, time is the variable. We have a competency-based grading system that allows for flexibility. Next slide. This is just a data snap of who we are. We had 99% of our students graduate in 2020. That was down 1% from last year. And that other scholar is going to make it here shortly. And in California, we have Csu Requirements. Students have to complete a body of coursework. We're a single pathway school because we believe that all students should be able to maintain those highest levels of learning. So all students are heterogeneously mixed, regardless of whether they're a language learner, special education, it doesn't matter. And every student takes the same set of coursework. If you'd like more information on that later, I'd be happy to touch base with you. And then we are 56% Title I and 6.4% special ed. Next slide. So this is the research upon which Del Lago was founded. We require these as readings with all of our staff. So the books are bought, and in a face-to-face environment, we spend pre-service workshop time bringing on new staff, both classified and certificated, in order to make sure that we maintain our commitment to culture wall to wall. We believe that it's everyone's responsibility. So the Ron Berger book, if you're not familiar with it, it's an older book, but it talks about the teacher as the craftsman. And so we really encourage and inspire our teachers to really be a craftsman and to really own their content. The school was also founded on the principles of how to create a culture of achievement. And so the pillars that are on the poster behind me, each chapter in the book on how to create a culture of achievement references a pillar. And so we do a lot of work around culture with our students. And then I've already talked about the restorative practice. It's everything that we do. It has been a challenge to do that in a virtual environment, but it is possible. And it's inspiring to see. I have an advisory too. And so I have a group of students that I teach once a week. And so it's inspiring to see that work come to life. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Assessment for Learning project. We are really trying to transform our assessments. We're a competency-based system. So we're really trying to transform our assessments to really privileging work that shows what a student knows and does versus a body of content that we think a student should know and do. And so that's just work we've been engaged with. We were engaged with that with the Center for Collaborative Education, and they've worked with our teachers, I believe, for 4 years now. We're getting ready to work with Gary Chapin again. I don't know if any of you know Gary, but we're getting ready to work with Gary again. We're going to do weekly our monthly conversations with teachers, really just around assessment practices, because we're in this world, we don't want to lose the momentum that we had going. And so we're maintaining those conversations. When you think about the communication piece, for us, this is really about maintaining conversations. I didn't put on here, but we are also working in a partnership with California State University San Marcos on cultural proficient pedagogy. And we're really looking at our pedagogical practices. And then the last pieces here are the quality principles for competency-based education and designing for equity. It's at the center of everything we do. And so I'll just leave you with this one, an example of how we're continuing to maintain a system of checks and balances at Del Lago. So one of the things we did is we made posters last year, and this was pre-COVID. We made posters of the indicators of a competency-based system, and we blew them up just as it was in the research on competency-based education. And then we asked everyone to place a dot where they thought we were on those 10 indicators. And then we talked about, as a staff, why were we positioned where we were positioned? And so now we're trying to move the conversation forward. So that is the body of research that we ascribe to as a school. And I know that was quick. I did have 104 slides to go through, but I recognize that I don't talk that fast. No, I'm teasing. Thank you so much. And I appreciate any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Ruth. Please, if there are questions, please do put them in the chat box. But we are going to move right along. We are going to now hear from Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Heyck Williams. I'm the director of the Two Rivers Learning Institute in Washington, D.C. It's associated with Two Rivers Public Charter School. And I'm going to focus on a specific case study. But before I do that, and that's our work around the Assessment for Learning project. But before I do that, I just want to give you a quick introduction to the school. And that is, we are a preschool through 8 network of 2 elementary and middle schools in Washington, D.C. Our demographics are around 65% African American, around 20% white, and then the remaining is a mix of mostly mixed race and Asian, and this very small percentage of Hispanic students, and that's mostly due to where we're located within the city, which is in the northeast sector of the city. Can we go to the next slide? So just a little bit about us. We're an EL education school. And just like Dr. Ellis and Ms. Hellams talked about, we have a set of pillars. Our pillars are around deeper learning, and they're around being a project-based school, as I mentioned before, and then also around student-centered work. We're also parent-founded, and so we do a lot of work around engagement with the community, and both with external partners as well as engaging our families. And then with the ultimate goal in the center there of being a community of lifelong learners. Our mission is to nurture a diverse group of students to become lifelong active participants in their own education, develop a sense of self and community, and become responsible and compassionate members of society. Can we go to the next slide? So I'm going to jump into just a case study around our assessment for learning project. And actually, before I do that, let me say a couple of things. And that is that in thinking about this work and our work around personalized learning and building on research, we believe that it is really key that we tie research to practice, and that practice then can go back and inform research. And so in all of our work and in the case study that I'm going to talk about with the Assessment for Learning project was intended to both take research and inform the practice that was happening in our schools, and then also for us to then be able to share that work in our own personal research at our school outward to influence the broader education conversation. And so I'm going to go real quickly through this list. And I noticed I gave a shout out to Ruth Chung-Wei. She's on the call today. So, hey, Ruth, it's good to see you. But this is just a quick overview of some of the types of research that we do and pull as we engage in a project. And so we certainly build on book length studies. So we've drawn from Ron Richard's work, and then a specific text from Laura Greenstein, who wrote Assessing 21st Century Skills. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we move through this. The other piece is drawing on white papers and resources from organizations like the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, now with Battelle for Kids, and then and PBL Works, which was formerly the Buck Institute. And then, of course, we draw articles. I saw a lot of people talking about blogs. We read a lot of blogs and draw on those resources as well. And then one thing that the Assessment for Learning project has given us the opportunity to do is work directly with researchers. And so to be able to work with Ruth when she was at Scale and on looking at our rubrics as well as some performance tasks, which I'll talk about in a minute, was invaluable. And then separately through the DC Project Zero, which is an offshoot of Harvard's Project Zero, we were able to work with Ron Richard a little bit around instruction that uses thinking routines. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so I noticed that there are a couple of folks from NGLC, so I just want to give a shout out real quick to Andy Calkins and Tony Siddle. So thanks for coming, guys. But they supported us on this Assessment for Learning project work, and so the case study that I'm going to give is just one example. But what I will say is that as an organization across our 3 schools, we do a number of projects that are run through what we call task forces that build on some shared leadership of teachers as well as administrators that sit typically from anywhere from a year to our Assessment for Learning project went on for about 5 years to develop a set of assessments. And so I'll talk a little bit more specifically about this project. So we can go to the next slide. So I shared our mission before, and I know that Dr. Ellis talked about what the competencies were for the students down in McComb. Similarly, we've been using this graphic to think about what are the competencies that we want our students to develop. So that is everything from core content and basic skills to character and collaboration skills, and then as well as critical thinking and problem solving skills. But as we were thinking about that work, we were also looking for what is the evidence base for developing competencies in any of those areas. And so can you hit the next? So under core content and basic skills, of course, we had a set of assessments. We had classroom assessments as well as the standardized assessments. We can go to the next one. So I'm not going to talk about this too much right now, but we've done a lot of work around our social emotional skills and thinking about, we have a set of scholarly habits that name what those outcomes are for students. Students create portfolios and run student-led conferences in which they reflect and share on their development of their social emotional skills. And then the last area is around critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And what led us to the Assessment for Learning project was that we were doing project-based learning and we believed that we were teaching kids these skills, but we asked the question is, how are our kids transferring those skills beyond the context of the projects in which they're learning them originally? And so we went on a journey to determine and develop some performance assessments. You can go to the next slide. And so unpacking that a little bit, we originally had 5 constructs, but then broke it down into 3. One is around effective reasoning, which is about making evidence-based claims. A separate one around problem solving, and then last around decision making. And those 3 areas became the main areas that we were looking to assess under critical thinking and problem solving. You can go to the next slide. And then I should say on that last slide that we built on that work from reviewing lots of literature. And so some of the books that I mentioned before, as well as reaching out to like the Collegiate Learning Assessment, Collegiate Learning Assessment Project was part of our research in that. And then we built on this work around using this particular graphic and thinking about if we care about any particular outcomes, they need to be aligned with whatever assessment tools we are using and creating, and that whatever those assessment tools are, they need to also then speak back to instruction. And similarly, instruction needs to speak back to those assessments and draw on our point towards kids developing those outcomes. And so this graphic became a really important keystone in thinking about any of those competencies that we talked about earlier, whether they were social, emotional, or the critical thinking and problem solving skills. Can we go to the next slide? So we broke down this project in thinking about, and from that last one, around defining the constructs, assessing the constructs, and then teaching towards the constructs. And so in defining the constructs, we drew on the work from the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, as well as looking at work out of Virginia Beach and public schools, as well as the Catalina Foothills School District. And then the Laura Greenstein book. And we eventually produced a set of rubrics, which we then shared with Scale and got their feedback and input on and revised based on that to create more consistency. And so the work that we did with Ruth and her team was really to finalize and build this set of rubrics around each of those 3 constructs that we talked about a minute ago. All right, and then go to the next slide. And so once again, so from that outcomes piece to assessing, we started to think about like, how do we determine whether or not students are actually transferring skills from one setting to another setting? And so even if we are building critical thinking skills within those projects, how do we determine whether or not kids are taking anything away and are able to use it beyond those original settings? And so we produced these short 1-hour performance assessment tasks. And once again, we worked with Ruth and her team in looking at those performance assessments to validate those and refine them to get more clear information about how kids are producing their critical thinking skills within the project and making their thinking visible. And you can go to the next slide. And then the last piece related to that triangle is around instruction. And we drew a lot of this work from Harvard's Project Zero and the thinking routines. And so teaching towards those constructs using some basic heuristics that students are able to use over and over again. So for example, in problem solving, we call it a KWI, where students identify what they know, what they want to find out, and what are their ideas for solutions. And then that becomes something that they can use over and over again as a true routine, but also then building those cognitive skills across disciplines. So whether it is in math or in science or within the context of a project, we can teach those explicitly and then utilize those within the context of the performance assessments that we built out. And so once again, you can see sort of the fingerprints of research that we have done throughout this project, and the way that all of those different research threads influenced our thinking and then our final product and the work that we've been able to produce, which is a set of performance assessments and rubrics, and then embedding that instruction intentionally into our classrooms to use formatively so that students can build their cognitive skills. You can go to the next slide. And so that concludes my kind of quick overview. But thank you guys for inviting me, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Wonderful. That is absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Jeff. And please, everyone, would you also help me thank Cederick and Ruth for these wonderful contributions, these great presentations. Thank you so much to all of you. Next slide, please.